The St. Louis Blues, eager to bounce back from a truly horrendous end to their season last year, enter the 2025-26 season with some optimism and a lot of pieces in place that they feel confident in. But with a lot of stiff competition in the West, the question on everybody's mind is whether the St. Louis Blues will be able to recapture the magic that got them on a playoff run last year, or if they just missed out on their best chance by a mere 3 seconds.
Forget me, for you should forget it. You're living in the past, man.
The St. Louis Blues entered the 2024-25 season with a lot of questions after a pretty disappointing 2023-24 campaign that saw them miss the playoffs. They entered the season not with the coach who had gotten them their first Stanley Cup, Craig Berube, but his replacement, Drew Bannister. And surprise, surprise, Bannister didn't last the entire season either. After a slow start to the season, he was fired and replaced by another cast-off from the Boston Bruins, Jim Montgomery. It was looking early on in the season that this would be another down year for the St. Louis Blues, who would be forced to retool and potentially enter into a rebuild. But then something funny happened. The Blues started to play really well. They went on a little hot streak. Jordan Binnington locked in at the Four Nations tournament. Jordan Kyrou picked up his play after a disappointing start to the season. Rob Thomas emerged as a legitimate #1 center. Their two offer-sheeted players from the Edmonton Oilers in Broberg and Holloway looked like absolute steals for the cost that they got them for. And the St. Louis Blues managed to pull off a magical run to get back into the playoffs, very reminiscent of their 2019 campaign that saw them win a Stanley Cup. While they certainly didn't have high expectations facing the President's Trophy Winnipeg Jets, some poor play by Connor Hellebuyck early in the series gave Blues fans some cause for hope, and St. Louis DJs were dusting off those Gloria vinyls for one more ride. When the Jets battled back and pushed it to a Game 7, Blues fans were honestly happy. They were playing with house money. A loss would be disappointing, but this wasn't like seasons past where the Blues would rip their fans' hearts out.
Look at him choke! Look at him suffer!
2 hours later.
Shoots, tip, they score! Game over! Series. You blew it, boy! You really blew it!
Dear God, you expected nothing, and you were still let down. Only the Blues could do this.
Don't turn your back on me. Let's get one thing straight. This is Shooter's tour. I've worked hard my whole life, paid my dues, and now it's Shooter's turn.
The Blues entered the 2024-25 season with largely the same group that got them to the playoffs last year, starting up top with Pavel Buchnevich, a name that makes New York Rangers fans quake in anger. He just recently re-signed with the Blues for 6 years at $8 million per, which is a pretty good rate for a guy who can't score in the playoffs unless it's against Connor Hellebuyck while he's shitting down his pant leg. His center will be Robert Thomas, who, as I said, is now a legit #1 center in the NHL and one of the better ones in my opinion. He can put up all the points he wants, but he's still not going to be the first person to come up when you Google his name, unfortunately. The other wing on that line is projected to be Jimmy Snuggerud, the young forward that the St. Louis Blues are placing a lot of their hopes and dreams onto. I'm sure that's going to go well. On an unrelated note, Blues fans are waiting for the day that Jordan Kyrou will finally be able to eclipse 80 points in a season. He's producing at a level that's, I guess, acceptable for his contract, but some Blues fans were really all over him for only producing 65 points a year instead of his usual 70. His center on the second line is Braden Shen, the team captain and a guy that fans of other teams absolutely despise. So in their jealousy, they try and denigrate him and beat him down by pointing out things like the fact that he only scored 60 points for the first time in his career last year. Rounding out the second line, their big acquisition from last offseason up front, Dylan Holloway, who proved that the just over $2 million that Edmonton didn't want to pay him would have been money well spent. He put up 60 points and 25 goals last year for just a pittance in St. Louis. Poor McDavid and Draisaitl. Without him, they were only able to make it back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Imagine what they could have done with him. On the third line, you got Jake Neighbors returning, who is still incredibly young, but becoming a very productive member of the Blues, putting up 46 points last year. But he's part of a reformed third line that includes Pio Suter and Nick Bjugstad. The fourth line for St. Louis is not your typical group of bruisers. It's some guys who actually have a little bit of skill, as well as keep the defensive zone clean. You have guys like Alexei Torpchenko, Oscar Sundqvist, and the Aussie Nathan Walker, as well as guys like Matthew Joseph and Alex Texier in the press box. As far as prospects go, the St. Louis Blues are pretty loaded up front. In addition to graduating Snuggerud, they have guys like Justin Carbonneau and Dalibor Doborski waiting in the minors and juniors this year.
All we hear is about their defense. They can't stop a nosebleed.
The back end of the St. Louis Blues is largely reformed, but there are still a few stalwarts of the old years back there, namely Colton Parayko, who's their number one defenseman right now. For my mind, he's kind of one of those in-between number one, number two guys. I think he serves well as a number one defenseman, but if you had a legit number one to go with him, he would be an elite number two guy. He's going to be paired with Cam Fowler, who they acquired from the Anaheim Ducks last year in what seemed like a dump-off by Anaheim. But Fowler surprisingly found his form in St. Louis and turned into a very productive player for them. And if St. Louis is lucky, he'll be that again this year. The other big RFA they poached from the Oilers last year, Philip Broberg, was, like Holloway, very good for St. Louis in his first year with the team. He'll be paired with Justin Falk, who was signed as a big-ticket free agent a while ago and has been on the decline a little bit for the last few years. Now, the third pairing is all about youth. Tyler Tucker is looking to get his first legitimate look in the NHL this year. He's played parts of the last 3 years in St. Louis. And he'll be paired with Logan Mailloux, who they got in a swap with Montreal, trading away Zach Bolduc and getting Mailloux. And I think Bolduc is probably the better player in that trade, but considering the lack of depth that the St. Louis Blues have on defense, particularly in their prospect pool, I understand the logic behind this move. And speaking of prospects, they really don't have anybody who's knocking on the door. They got guys in the system like Theo Lindstein and Adam Jiricek, but I don't think either of those guys are playing for the Blues this year.
Wait, it's not Goldberg. It's Russ. Here, take it. Thanks. The goalie.
In goal, it's the trash bin himself. Jordan Binnington returns for the Blues as their number one goalie once again. And Binnington is a guy who, when he locks in, is almost unbeatable. Consistency has always been an issue, and the mental game has also been a big issue for him. I would say he's one of the 15 to 12 best goalies in the NHL. If he could lock in that consistency, he could be like top 8 or top 10. But as it stands right now, you do need a good backup behind him, and the Blues have that in Joel Hofer. He's a guy who can step in at 25 years old and has been able to play a good chunk of games over the last few years, and he's a guy that potentially, if Binnington falls off, could be groomed as a future starter for them.
You ain't gonna be able to hit them. They're too good and you suck something off.
Yes, sir, I sure do.
The St. Louis Blues definitely got better when they fired Bannister last year and replaced him with Jim Montgomery. Monty is a guy who has always been able to take elite talent and get them to perform at the highest level in the regular season. The problem is when he gets to the playoffs, and last year was no exception. His team's inability to hold on to a lead late and take advantage of a terrible goaltending performance by Connor Hellebuck is one of the main reasons that they lost in the first round to a team that they should have, on paper, had no chance to beat. Now, you could say that good coaching is evident by the fact that they were able to hang with the President's Trophy-winning Jets, but the fact that promising seasons turning into early playoff exits are becoming something of a pattern for Monty, both in Boston and Dallas, indicates to me that this could be just a simple matter of the fact that St. Louis ran into a cold goaltender and couldn't manage to finish the job, whereas other better coached teams probably could.
Since you're new here, I'm gonna cut you a break.
The offseason was all about refining the details for the St. Louis Blues. Torrey Krug obviously retired due to an ankle injury that's been nagging him the past few years, which sucks for their cap situation. To augment that loss, they brought in Logan Mailloux in that trade for Bolduc, like I said. They also signed Pia Suter and Nick Bjugstad to shore up the third line, which is a place where they had a little bit of trouble last year. Adding him for some depth, where they were having to play guys like Brandon Saad, Bolduc, Matthew Joseph, and Radek Faksa last year. And then in the draft, the Blues added a very skilled forward prospect, a position of need for them in Justin Carbonneau. He's a prospect I really like, and he already showed some of those flashes in his first preseason game.
Pretty good. Pretty damn good, lads! Yeah!
I am really excited to see what Jimmy Snuggerud is going to bring to the St. Louis Blues, because in the brief flashes that we saw from him last year, he looked very good. He had a goal in 4 points in 7 games, which means he is technically eligible for the Calder Trophy this year, and he's a guy who has accomplished a lot at the collegiate level. I'll be very interested to see just how well he's able to translate that skill set to the NHL over a longer sample size.
I'll give you a winter prediction. It's gonna be cold, it's gonna be gray, and it's gonna last you for the rest of your life.
I see this season for the St. Louis Blues going very similar to last season. They're going to be a team that is chippy and hard to play against in the regular season, they'll struggle to get into the playoffs, but I think they'll have a chance at the end of the day. I am a bit concerned that they're playing in a Central Division that is incredibly loaded. You've got teams like Dallas, Winnipeg, obviously, who are going to be the top dogs, but also Colorado, Utah's going to be improved, and the Minnesota Wild are always dangerous. I do think that this division will produce 2 wildcard teams, and St. Louis could very well be one of them. I'm just not 100% sure it'll be them. If I was betting, I would say St. Louis is the team that's the odd man out. And if they do get in, I don't see them getting further than the first round. Again, Jim Montgomery is their head coach. He just hasn't proven that he can be a guy that's successful in the playoffs, taking good teams on deep runs, let alone teams that have a lot of flaws.